Good afternoon, participants. I hope we had a great session in the morning and afternoon. We have, so this post-lunch session, we will start with regression models by Professor P.M. Shivamurthy. I mean, he has already taken you vector calculus. And in this session, he'll be talking more about the journey from regression models towards deep learning. And the need, I think Dr. Guru had given you a brief insight about what are features, how do select features, and how do you reduce the number of features for your classification or your regression task. But Dr. Shivamurthy will be talking about more on the need for, at this stage, is there a need to really look at that feature extraction where deep learning is able to capture on its own? So we want to understand more from him. So over to you, Dr. Shiva. So the session starts from just 5 minutes from now. So over to you, Shiva.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Anand. So welcome back, all the participants. So nice to meet you again. So we had a wonderful session day before yesterday with you, and so we learned a lot of mathematics. So that is how calculus is going to be used in machine learning. So we understood the beauty of the vector calculus, and followed by that linear algebra and the probability that we learned yesterday, and the regression models, and other today you also learned the dimensional reduction techniques. Yes. So my task is to just to see how to take you towards from a very fundamental elements of machine learning, that is from starting with regression models. So with a whole lot of the mathematical tools which you have learned, so how it is going to be applied in a machine learning arena, and how we can move towards the present day buzzword, that is deep learning. So how the mathematics have evolved from the very fundamental linear algebra towards from vector calculus and with the probability and the other elements which you have learned, till how deep learning has adopted all those elements, and how it has evolved as a very powerful tool in creating today's so-called artificial intelligence elements, and how a reality today, right? So let's try to dig into these things, starting with the very fundamental elements of the regression. So the topic was assigned to me was a regression model, as it was covered yesterday in full length. So I thought, I will start with the regression model and take you towards the field of the deep learning, and how the mathematics have been embedded in every aspect of these deep learning networks. Okay, so let me start sharing my presentation. Okay, right. So let us start with the understanding of the regression, and how it starts and what exactly is regression. And yesterday, Dr. Nilima Sancheti has given you a wonderful ideas about how linear regressions and logistic regressions are basically used in machine learning activities. So from there, we can move towards the fundamental aspects of neural networks, and from there, how the deep learning is evolved. So instead of just covering the models and the application, I'll be taking you through some of the mathematical elements, how those mathematical stuffs are involved in modeling these algorithms, right? Right. So to start with, let's try to understand what is linear regression. I think most of you, with all the sessions gone through for for the past few days, we have understood what is linear regression. So in this diagram, what you see is a set of red dots, which is arranged in a Cartesian grid, XY coordinate grid. So this is my the X, and this is my Y. So as we all understand, Y is a function of X, right? And we understood from the point of vector calculus that is to understand the dynamics of the function. So we use vector calculus. So here, the blue line, what you see in this diagram is a representation of the function Y, okay? And that function has been generated or been modeled in an iterative step or in a dynamic way. So you need to understand the dynamics of that function, which tries to characterize the data sets which are represented in the form of red dots. So what we see here is a sample data which are in the form of red dots, and we see that these one of them machine learning activity is to characterize the distribution, and we start with a function that is f of x. As we understood in the vector calculus, it is basically trying to find out a rise over the run. So what is run? Run is our x-axis and y is our rise. Okay, so we see that as x runs towards from left to right, so we are trying to see how the characteristic function y is rising either upwards or it is going downwards, whatever. So in this case, you can see that it is rising linearly upwards, and this rising basically is characterized by our different derivation functions, as we understood in our previous talk, and with those set of derivations, trying to find out a better fit of the function to describe the distribution of the data sets which are plotted in this space, in this XY plane. So this is an XY plane, and I see that I have positions all these red dots, the data elements in the respective positions. So I need to characterize the distribution of those data with this function, that is y, which is equal to f of x. Okay. And ironically, this procedure is not a single step activity, so it has to be iterative, because we need whatever the equation you see here, y cap equal to bx plus a, is the actual function we are looking at, that is your f of x. So this does not fit exactly at one shot. So this has to be iterative, right? So that is why it is called as y cap. So y cap is an approximate fit for the data distribution, whereas y is the actual function. So we need to find out the y cap, which exactly represents y. So in terms of linear algebra, I'm trying to find out a projection of y in terms of y cap, right? So I believe you try to understand the projection of something, some vector onto another vector, right? And you try to see the difference. It should be 90 degree. Okay, so let me, take an eraser. Okay. So if I want to project this vector, so I project it with exactly 90 degree to the corresponding vector a here. So this is my x. So I'm trying to project it onto this, and what I see is y cap here. So this projection is my y cap, but this projection is not exactly as this. So this is my f of x. Okay, so will not be same as this. This is my y. So there is a difference, and that difference is this. This is called as an error. Okay, right? So this error, my objective is to see that, to understand how this error is going to be minimized. So yesterday in the optimization talk, you understood how the optimization happens by minimizing the errors, and this error minimization is not a one single step procedure. So this y cap bx plus a is as good as representing an equation y is equal to mx plus c. It's an equation of a line. Okay, so I can always, in terms of machine learning terms, I can always say this m is the weights, the x is the input parameter, and c is nothing but is the bias. Okay, so I'll come to these terminologies later, so let's not worry about too much on this. But now you can clearly see that m is a slope from mathematical perspective. This is the slope at which this blue line is oriented. Okay, and what is the error of projecting these red dots onto this blue line? Okay, and that error is my least squared error. Okay, and this least squared error, you can see the equation. It is the difference between, here it is given as theta of xi, that is nothing but y cap, and this is the y. Okay, so I take the Euclidean distance. Least squared error is basically is the squared error, in the sense it is nothing but is the Euclidean distance between the y cap and y. So you try to find out a Euclidean distance, that is y cap minus y whole square by 2. Okay, so that's my distance, and that should be least. So my objective is to find out the least squared error. So this happens, iteratively. At one shot you will not get this error least. It will be bigger in the initial iteration. So I may fit my line somewhere here initially, but as I move towards, as I change the error, my fit, the line will be fit exactly like this. So it will move towards an approximate, fit of the data distribution with a very least squared error. Okay, so this we can see with respect to one single data point. So when it comes to all the data set which are going to be represented in this regression, so I need to have a cost function. The cost function is the total error incurred when you try to fit a function to characterize the data distribution, that is j of theta, and that is given by sum of all the least square error across all the m data samples. Okay, so that's the example. So my objective is to see that now this fitting a line or fitting a character function is what is called as a regression. Okay, so regression, now you understand that it is a iterative process, and this iterative process involves projection of points onto another dimension, that is linear algebra, and also computing the least square error, that is the gradient. So as I told, it's a rise over run. So I need to find out how much of y is changing with respect to x. So that is the partial derivative of y with respect to x. So my objective is to find out the least square error. In calculus, I call it as partial derivative of y with respect to x. Now, since this is not a partial derivative, because there is only one parameter involved. If there are multiple parameters involved, in that case you use a partial derivative to represent the least square error, right? So this is what basically is a linear regression. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing. Now in this case, the drawback is that a line cannot represent x, because I see that this characteristic function, that is y equal to mx plus c, is a straight line, and the straight line cannot characterize every natural distribution of data. In this case, I can say it's an approximation characterization, but if the data distribution is very irregular, a straight line cannot satisfy our objective. So in that case, we need to go with another thing. So let me move to the next slide. Okay, so that's nothing but logistic regression. So it is logistic regression. So logistic regression is basically a binary classifier. Okay. This one. Okay. So this is a binary classifier. Why we say it as a binary classifier? If you just look at this diagram, we can see that there's an image of cat. Okay, I'm trying to feed all the pixel values of the image I vectorize all the pixel values of the image. So if it is a 2D image, I take all the pixels row wise and I flatten them into a single vector. Okay. So it gives me a single column vector with an arrangement of all the pixel elements of the image. So this is my X, the input data samples. Okay. So my objective is to find out how much weightage is given to each pixel elements to decide whether it is a cat or not. So that weightage is nothing but W, W1, W0, and W. In this example is taken 12,287. Right now, you can see this equation inside this circle. And that is nothing but is my linear regression. I'm trying to fit a function f of x, okay, which is equal to W transpose into xi plus b, which is nothing but a line. So I try to fit a blue line, you can see on the right top corner, which is nothing but a linear regression. Okay. See, the weights are basically are the model parameters, that's nothing but mathematical. It's a slope, with which the functions are is being fit. Okay, so that is what is my object. We need to find out that value. In this case, if you take in mathematics it is mx plus c. My objective is to find out m. Okay, m and c. So m is a slope and c is my intercept, right? So I need to find out the exact value of these things. They are the coefficients of x. Okay, so that I get a perfect match for y. So that's a mathematical definition. In this case, I call this slope as the weights corresponding to every x parameters, and the bias is the intercept. So I give very least weightage to the bias because the weights are more, they overcome the bias because that's a scalar value, whereas weights are vector, right? Now that is my linear regression. Now you can see this is a blue line cannot characterize, identifying whether the data samples are going to be a cat or not. Okay, it's quite difficult. So I need to, because now this is a task of binary classification, that is trying to know whether it is a cat or not. So I need to have two classes, okay, a regression grouping into two different data samples into two different classes, and that two different classes, is it yes or no? So that basically can be modeled with a function called an activation function, okay, and that activation function, in this case we use a sigmoid function. Okay, a sigmoid function, as you all know, this is given by this sigmoid function here, 1 over 1 plus e to the power of b naught plus b1 plus x, that is the y function. In this case, I call it as a z function, okay, in short, z function. So z is equal to w transpose xi plus b. So this is my linear regression function. So I will pass this onto an activation function, that is sigmoid function, which will modify the linear function into a Kirby function, that is a S-shaped function, which is colored in amber here. Okay, so wherein the data will get distributed in two different points. So now this is my point, a middle point, from where any data which are represented above will be in the one class, and any data which are below here will be in another class. Okay, so I fix up a threshold, say 0.5 here, and if this is basically it's the value which is 0.73, which in this case as a case, if this value, the sum of all these activation function results in this, and this is going to be greater than the threshold here, it says it is a cat. Okay, if it is less than 0.5, it is not a cat. So this is one task of logistic regression. Okay, and don't worry about what is neural network. I'll come to that later. But your neural network, the basics, fundamental, stones or building blocks are from the logistic regression. Okay, now why it is called as logistic regression? So now you can clearly see, again, similar to the linear regression, the errors are going to be computed using it's an iterative process. At one iteration, you will not be able to get the exact fit, the S-shaped fit for all the data samples. It has to be iterative. So you have to compute the error at every iteration and see that at every iteration you change the slope. That is W in this case. I call weights in machine learning terminology, in mathematics terminology, I call it as weights. Sorry, the slope. Okay. So, yeah, the question why we require a curve? The curve is because, because the data is irregular. You cannot have a straight line. Straight line cannot characterize all the data. It has to be an S-shaped curve. So the data would be somewhere close to this. So at this point exactly, you can see that there is a perfect slope here. Okay, but when it comes, because we need to see this function stabilizes here and this function stabilizes here. So you don't have a very zero derivative at this point. So any data samples which gets grouped at this point, will have no error. So that means those data elements are the exact fit. They're exactly fitting into that particular lines. Whereas some of the data points which doesn't even partially looks like a cat, partially looks like does not look like a cat. They come at the curvy parts. Okay, right. Okay, now coming to the cost function, as similar to the linear regression, here also we take the cost function derivation is not exactly, because here I'm not trying to find out the Euclidean distance. So I cannot find out an Euclidean distance as we did in the case of the line, the linear function. So here I need to find out a different error because it is a probabilistic function. So I need to go with a likelihood error, right? So this is called as a likelihood error. So let me see how to compute the likelihood error. Let me tell you the mathematics of that. Okay, so just a second. Just a So we also call it as, now, as you know that, the y, just a minute. Right. So y cap is given by the activation function of the z function, that is the linear regression. That is, in this case, the activation function is a sigmoid function. Okay. So the y cap, no, I need to find out the difference between the actual y and the approximate y. So how to find out the difference? So this is a likelihood. I mean, I need to find out the difference is the error between the projected and the actual, and that is basically is my the loss function. Okay. So the loss function is given by, so my expectation is y cap is the probability of y equal to 1 given the x. Okay. So this is my the probability. So suppose if y is equal to 1, right? In that case, the probability of y, the given input as x, the chance of y equal to the y cap is high, right? So if the y is equal to 1, suppose if y equal to 0, so if the y equal to 0, then the probability of y getting a chance of y will not be exactly y cap, it is 1 minus y cap. Okay, so you know the probability theory. So yesterday we have attended the sessions on probability. So how the probability is computed. So if y equal to 1, it is a high chance of y cap projecting exactly the y as it is, given the x as the input parameter is high. But if y equal to 0, then the probability will be 1 minus of the actual projection, right? So now the loss function is given by L of y cap is a function of y cap and y, that is projected and actual, is given by 1 over 2 of y cap minus y whole square. Now in this case, since this is not a line, so it has to be a probability function. So I can easily say it's the probability of getting y given the x as input is given by y cap of y and 1 minus y cap of 1 minus y. Okay. Now, if I expand this, taking if y equal to 1, taking the first condition, if y equal to 1, you substitute y equal to 1 in both of these equations. What we get is this y cap will be there, and this 1 minus y will become 0, hence this whole thing will become 1. Okay, so if y equal to 1, the chance of getting y given the x as input will be y cap. Okay, so similarly for if y for y equal to 0, so I substitute 0 here, so y cap to the power of 0 is 1 multiplied by 1 minus y cap into 1 minus 0, that is I get 1 minus y cap. So this will be 1 minus y cap, right? So this I could able to derive. So as we can see here, this I have derived it here, right? So that means ultimately, so if I want to put it together, so I want to normalize the entire probability predictions. So I take a logarithmic of this probability value. So I get a log likelihood of this, so that is p of y given x, log of p of y given x is given by log of y cap to the power of y, that is 1 minus y cap to the power of 1 minus y. Okay, so if I expand this, so what I get is y log y cap plus 1 minus y log 1 minus y cap. Okay, so this logarithm function optimizes the probabilities. So it actually normalizes the value, and you get this function at the end as a function of error. Okay, so this is the loss function in logistic regression. It is the log likelihood error function. This is called as a log likelihood error function. Okay. Now let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so like this, there are various other, yeah. So let me, before taking you to that. Okay. Sorry, it's a movie there. Okay, so let me talk to you about the different activation functions which we'll be dealing with. So now that we have seen sorry. Okay, so we have now understood how this logistic regression can be used as a binary classifier with the help of a sigmoid function. So we see that there are a variety of activation function which changes the behavior of the function which we modeled with respect to the linear regression, that is y is equal to mx plus c. So here, apart from sigmoid function, there are other different activation functions. One is, as you know, the sigmoid function is a S-shaped function. So with a function called sigma x 1 over 1 plus e to the power of x. So you get the middle point is the point where okay. I think there is an issue with my pen. Yeah. Okay. Now, similarly, we have a tan h function. Tan h function is quite similar to the sigmoid function, but where the value varies from +1 to -1 here. Okay, so the middle point lies in the origin 0, 0. So whereas here the sigmoid functions varies from 0 to +1. So you see this is the middle point. And similarly, the rectified linear unit is what is the very popular activation function, which is almost same as the linear function, that is my linear regression function. So wherein I get the negative quadrant will be eliminated. I get only the positive quadrant. So the function is, it's the maximum of any the projection that is between 0 and x. Okay, and what we have is another leaky ReLU. So wherein the leaky ReLU is trying to find out a smaller error in the negative quadrant, which will also be considered instead of a very strict ReLU function. Okay, so tan h function is given by e to the power of z minus e to the power of minus z and e to the power of z plus e to the power of minus z. Okay, so this is a function, the hyperbolic tan function, and it's quite similar to the sigmoid. So ReLU function is quite similar to the leaky ReLU. So most preferably in neural network, most of the middle layers shall come to that later. So we'll take rectified linear unit just because of its simplicity, because it is a linear function and it does not consider the negative values. Okay, right. Okay. Now we see how the gradient descent is applied here. Now, day before yesterday, when we spoke the vector calculus, we talked a lot of so much about the gradient descent algorithm. So, what do you mean by computing gradient? So, you remember I was telling you that gradient is a computation of Jacobian, which is nothing but is a first order derivative of the any function. Okay, so here the error, the loss function, what you get at the end is trying to find out. I mean, your objective is to find out how much of loss is going to happen after every iteration of learning. So when you fit a function, so in first iteration, in first step, what is the error incurred? Okay, so I need to estimate that loss, and this estimation happens using this gradient descent function. So in logistic regression, so I can say now I know that x is my input and w is my parameter. Okay, model parameter. So let me consider there are two inputs x1 and x2, and there are two weight parameters. Remember, it is the y is equal to wx plus b, and finally I consider the b also as the bias. I'll take these four as inputs to a function, that is my z function, which is nothing but is a linear function, that is y is equal to mx plus c. So in this case, I call it as z, and in place of mx plus c, I call it as w1 x1 plus w2 x2 plus b. Okay, and this is a linear function, this will not help me in modeling the data distribution exactly. So what I do is I need to go and take the help of different activation functions to exactly change the shape or characteristics of that function, and I call it as an activation function A. So one thing we have learned is a sigmoid function, okay, for a binary classifier. Since it is a logistic regression, it's a binary thing. So, sorry. Okay. This will result in a loss function, loss of a comma y. Okay. So I'm trying to find out. So this sigma of z is my y cap. Okay. So y cap is my the actual prediction I'm going to get. Y is the actual thing. So I need to find out. So y cap is the same as a. So I need to find out the loss, the difference between y cap and y, that is a and y. Okay, that's my loss function. So this you can do it with the derivations which we saw earlier. It is a log likelihood error. Now what happens, if I want to this has a loss in the sense the function, the sigmoid function, is not exactly fitting the data distribution. So there is a lot of error. So in the first iteration, so I need to correct that error. The correction of that error is nothing but change in the slope. The slope in this case is my weights. Okay, W1 and W2 and the bias. Okay, so I need to change the weights, the slope, and the y-intercept. So I need to compute that. I need to change that value. So how do I do that? So for that, I need to propagate backwards, okay, in this flow, in this pipeline, and update these W1 and W2 and B. So how do you do this? So for that, I take the help of this vector calculus again. So I need to find out the derivative of the loss function with respect to the activation function. So that that means to say that it is d of L of a comma y divided by dA. It is rise over run. So how is the loss varying with respect to the changes happening in the activation function? Okay, and I denote it as dA, right? Now, if you derive this loss function, as you know, it's a log likelihood error that we saw in the previous slide, that is y log of y cap plus 1 minus y log of 1 minus y cap. So what I get is derivative of that is 1 over y minus y by a and 1 minus y by 1 minus a. So this is the dA. So this basically is the derivative of a loss with respect to the activation function. So I keep this and I move backwards, okay, and I calculate the change in the z function, that is the derivative of z, the loss function with respect to the z, the actual linear function. So this is a chain rule. Actually what I'm trying to do is that, so I need to find out dz, which is given by dl by dz. So with the help of chain rule, which we discussed in the last session, This is dl by dA, and this is nothing but dA by dz. Okay, so I need to compute dl by dz and dA by dz. So here dl by dA is known to me here, right, on the right hand side. dA by dz, it is you are deriving this activation function with respect to z. Okay, so when I derive this, dA by dz will be a minus y. Okay, so you know the activation function is this sigmoidal of 1 over 1 minus e to the power of this w1 x1 w2 x2 like that. Okay, that is that when I derive it back, it will be a minus y. Okay, and so what I have, this component is here, this component is here, so I take the dot product of this, and what I get is minus y plus 1 minus y by 1 minus a, right, and dot product of a into 1 minus a, sorry, this is not a minus a, sorry. Yeah, this should be a into 1 minus a. Okay, so I substitute here. So finally what I get is a minus y. If I simplify this equation, I get a minus y, and that is my dz. Okay, so what I've done is I've borrowed the propagation of error backwards to see how z function changes with respect to the loss. Okay, once I have a dz, so I can easily I need to again derive the loss function with respect to the weights and the bias, because that is what I'm going to change the slope and the y-intercept, which is going to be useful in computing the new values of the weights and the bias. Okay, so that we can do by taking the partial derivative of L with respect to W1 is given by dW1, okay, which is equal to x into dz, x1 into dz. Similarly, dW2 is given by x2 into dz, and similarly dB is given by dz. Okay, so I get the delta the slight variation in the weight W1, slight variation W2, slight change in the error in the bias. So these are the slight errors which are already there in place in W, the current slope and current bias, the current y-intercept. So I need to subtract those errors. Okay, with respect to L, I have derived this. So that means I need to subtract those elements to get a new estimate for the slope and the y-intercept, that is weight and the bias. So that is existing minus alpha into dW1. W2 is W2 minus alpha into dW2. And B is equal to B minus alpha into dB. So what is this alpha? Alpha, we call it as learning rate. Okay, so how fast you are going to eliminate this error, the dW1, dW2 and dB from the current W, and trying to arrive at a new values for the weights and bias in terms of machine learning. Okay, so this is how the gradient descent error is computed in the logistic regression. Okay, all right, so let's move on with the next thing. Okay, similarly we have another function which helps us in finding, apart from sigmoid, hyperbolic tan, and ReLU function, we have something called softmax regression. So what is softmax regression? So your logistic regression is basically adopted to classify only two classes, two groups of elements, whether it is yes or no, true or false, or something like that. But in case, if since it is a function, So if there are multiple classes in the data samples, so I go with a softmax function. So it is a refined version of hardmax regression. So hardmax regression says that, okay, I have several activation functions like this, okay. So each activation function trying to group a certain class of elements into one category, okay. So all the outputs of this will generate a vector where I get some values. I get a 1 here, I get 0, 0, 0, 0 like this, corresponding to each activation functions. Okay, so this means to say that a data value here, which has propagated to these activation functions, has enabled this function saying that the data belongs to this class, say C1. Okay, so this is a hard max, the maximum value with a hard assignment. Okay, so that is 1. So whereas it does not, you cannot strictly, you cannot classify them into any of these classes. This is a hard max classification. Soft max classification is given an X value. So given all these, nodes like this, activation functions, partly I can say this belongs to this, partly I can say this belongs to this, partly I can say this, partly, and thus part or probability of belongingness is my likelihood. Okay, so that's my P of Y belonging to some function, this function, okay, given an input X. Okay, so whether it is equal to 1 or not. So it cannot be an integer assignment. It should be a soft assignment. So that means it carries a partial values like this, 0.75, 0.85, 0.55 like this. Okay, so whichever has a maximum value, so I can clearly say that, I have certain amount of data, part of the data belongs to this class, part of the data belongs to this class, part of the data belongs to this, and part of the data belongs to this. Now to arrive at the equations for the softmax function, why this has become a probability, likelihood. So this is basically is a vector. You can say this is e to the power of z of 1, the z function of the first node, first activation function. Similarly, e to the power of z2, e to the power of z3, like this, e to the power of z. Okay, so all these will give rise to these vectors, and now the activation functions for all this, when I have this the classification functions, the z functions obtained like this. So I denote my activation function as e to the power of z divided by the sum of j1 to n, that is tj. Okay. So what is the state t? T is this. Is a set of all the z functions, e to the power of z, e to the power of z, and all that. And this, I take the ratio of this with respect to the sum of t of all the t's. Okay, so all the t's are basically these t's. Okay, t1, t2, t3, and t4. Okay, so all of these things will be summed up, and that for every value, if I take this, I get this softmax regression value. Okay, so this is actually one of the regression function which helps me in finding out the classify the elements in using probabilities. Okay, right. So with this idea, so we can move on to the concept of neural network. So in the previous slide, we saw that the regression model works. Sorry. Okay, so this is a logistic regression. All the input values x1, w1, x2, w2 will be fed into the z function, and from there you will get an activation function. This whole of this is my one single neuron function. So I call it as one single neuron function in my neural network. Okay, so here, so we will move on to the concept of neural network from this. Okay, so this is how a neural network looks like. So every circle here represent a neuron function with an activation. So you feed every circle with the input X and the weights to get the activations as output. Okay, similarly here you get this activation and corresponding weight as input, and you get the second act. So let me call it as 1, and this is 1 and this is 2. So here again A2W3 will be A3, like that. So this moves on in different layers. So now you can see in the picture, the entire diagram is divided into 3 groups. One is the input layer, the output layer, and the hidden layer. So what we saw is in the logistic regression, we didn't have the hidden layers. We had input layer and the output layer. Okay, so whatever the output you get is my final output, saying whether it is a binary classifier or a softmax classification or whatever, right? In this case, the number of hidden layers indicate how much of learning is happening. Okay, if the number of hidden layers are very less, 1 or 2 or none of the hidden layers, then it is called as a shallow network, shallow neural network. Once the number of hidden layer increases, so the learning also increases. So it is like, you are learning too much in the middle layers. So you are actually revolving in the same loop inside under different layers with so many activation functions in between. So more the deeper the number of layers you have, the neural network is called as deep learning, deep neural network. Okay, so this is where we start understanding what is deep neural network. Okay, right. Now, this is what exactly I told you, how this forward bias and backward propagation happens. The Z function is computed here, and this is the activation function, okay, which non-linear, it's a non-linear function of this linear function. So this is one neuron. So what you get is an activation here, and from this again you get a new set of weights for the second neuron. You get A activation, then B is the bias, then you get a sigmoid function again. So in the middle layers you have the linear rectified linear unit function, whereas here it's a sigmoid function. So what you get is a loss function, and we understood how to compute the derivative of loss here. So you get the derivation of loss with respect to A and A with respect to Z, and that is why this gives me DL by DZ. Okay, which with the help of chain rule, what we understood in my vector calculus topic. So similarly, this whatever the laws you have obtained will be passed to the next layer. So here also DZ2 of this, and this is basically D's. Yeah. So this is a chain rule of DZ1 by DA, and you have DA by DZ. Okay, so you get the total loss like this. Okay, now let's move on to the real understanding of forward and backward propagation. Okay, let me explain how this, whatever we understood with respect to logistic regression, let's try to understand with respect to the linear neural network concept. So I have X, you have W1 and B1 as the input. Okay, so you have a Z function, Z equal to Z1 equal to W1X plus B1, okay, which will lead to activation function 1, that is first layer. It's a sigmoid function. Let's understand. Instead of sigmoid, I just call it as any function. I call it as G function of Z. Z1. G can be either rectified linear unit or hyperbolic tan, or it can be anything. So this is my single neuron function, right? And this takes you the output to the next layer, that is Z2 is W2. Instead of X here, I have A1 as my input, okay, plus B2. Okay, then you have the activation. A2 is, the last layer is usually sigmoid. I take it for simplicity because it's classifying function. And what I get is the loss. So loss of A2 with respect to the Y. Okay. Now this is my forward propagation of neural network. Okay. So now to go back and correct the errors incurred in the initial values set by W1 and L, I derive the loss with respect to A2 first. So that is DL by DA2 will give me DA2. I just name it as DA2. Okay. So with this, I need to compute DZ2 is A2 minus Y. So because you just go back and see how DZ2 is computed by substituting that, you get then similarly D. So DZ A minus Y is basically it's a chain rule. Let me rewrite. It's DZ2 by DA2. Okay, and DA2 by okay, DZ. Okay, now here this is given by A minus A2 minus Y. Okay, just a second. Right. So this is A2 minus Y. Now from this I need to modify my weight parameters W2 and B2 in this layer. So that for that, I need to find out the error of the values which we have fitted at this moment. That is W2. It's a deviation from the actual thing. DZ2A1 and DB is equal to DZ2. Okay. Now from this, I can compute W2 is W2 minus the learning rate into dW2. B2 is B2 minus alpha dB2, right? Now this, I will carry it forward to the previous thing, okay? So here, again, I have this DA1, right? So in this case, the function is any function, okay, and that is dg of dA. So that is given by g dash of z1. It's another symbolic representation. It's a derivation of that activation function, whether it is a LO or hyperbolic tan or whatever. So you take the derivation of that. Okay, g is any function. I take the derivation of that. Then finally, how do you calculate dz1? dz1 is the W2, the new weight you computed here, right? W2 dz2. Okay, W2 dz2 multiplied by the derivation of this one, okay, g dash z1. So you can see that I'm taking the modified weight of the previous layer into this, and I try to see how it is changing, multiplied by this this activation function, the derivation of this activation function g dash. Okay. Now with this, I can calculate dW1 is dz1x and dB1 is dz1. Now finally, I arrive at W1 is W1 minus alpha into dW1 and B1 is B1 minus alpha dB1. Okay. So this is how you come across the thing, and let me take it to the next slide. Yeah. So deep learning is nothing but who, what, and where. I mean, you're thinking too much, That is what we see in every layers of the thing. And as you think deeper, you become more intelligent, and we see the relation between typical machine learning to deep learning leads to intelligence. Okay, fine. So forward propagation at layer 1, the set of to summarize, you have Z function at layer L is WL a to the power of L minus 1 plus BL. The L is actually the layer number. Okay, at any given layer, the activation function is G of L at ZL. So it can be any activation function. Okay, similarly, at backward propagation, I have the gradient calculation is DZL is DAL into GL dash of ZL. Okay, that then DWL is equal to DZL. I'm just correlating with respect to this A of L minus 1, and DBL is DZL. Okay, then you have DAL minus 1 is given by WLZL. Okay, DZL is given by WL plus 1. Okay, DZL plus 1. Then this whole thing is actually DAL. Okay, into GL dash and ZL. So I'm just translating those equations into this particular layer specific, making it very layer specific. I'm going a little quicker, you can relate it to previous slides later on. Okay, fine. Right. So now there are a lot many things, in mathematics which are included in tuning the neural network models. There's something called a bias and variance. So what is bias? It's called as underfitting. Underfitting in the sense, you get this problem because when you don't actually, the accuracy is very less. So you have very less data. So you have the solution for this, when you doesn't train much. So for that, you need to have a bigger network and you need to train longer. So underfitting does not, it will be a smooth curve. So it does not fit the data distribution exactly. So a linear function underfits the irregular data distribution. Okay. Whereas overfitting is where when you have a lot of curvy functions like this. So it is trying to learn more about the data. In the process, it will not exactly figure out what exactly it is. So it is overfitting. So for the solution is you need to regularize and you need to have more data values. Okay. So let's quickly move on to what is regularization. Regularization is basically to see how the cost function J of W and B for a given weight and bias. So how do you vary the cost function so that you regularize the weight of the learning? Okay. So to avoid overfitting. So that is given by 1 over m sigma of I equal to 1 m L of y cap comma y. Okay. So this is my usual cost function. So I just add what is called as a regularizing term lambda by 2m, okay, with a Euclidean norm of the weight function. Okay, so I'm trying to decay. So what I'm trying to do is that this is called as L2 regularization. It's because you're using a Euclidean norm, L2 norm, regularization. Okay, so in this case, since the cost function, the change in the cost function comes in the back propagation. So what we do is the DWL is computed as DL of DZ plus with the regularizing term, that is W square by M. So that means I am trying to modify my weight with the regularization term. So to see that, I increase, this is the weight deviation. So this is called as a weight decay. So I try to decay the weights. It leads to elimination of many nodes. Leads to elimination of many nodes or activation functions. That means I don't learn more. See, high variance is because you are learning more because of the more weightage. So what I do is, with the regularization term, I am trying to reduce my weight a little so that some of the weights I try to nullify. Okay, so when I try to nullify, my learning reduces, the learning rate reduces. In the process, there will not be high variance in learning, but it should not lead to high bias also. Okay, so that is the job of regularization. Okay, now, yeah, there are many other methods like dropout. Dropout is eliminating some of the nodes manually, okay, with a threshold. Then you have data augmentation. Data augmentation is you increase the data set as deeper the learning is happening. So as you increase the data, more the type of data you increase, so it reduces the variance. Okay, then early stopping. So more the deeper the network, it learns more. So I stop at the early stage. And then normalization. So I normalize the data set. So how do I normalize? So if the data is ranging in a very high range, I need to normalize with a mean. So that is mean is given by 1 over m sigma of I equal to 1 to m xi. Okay, and I subtract x with the mean. Okay, so with that, I am normalizing with respect to mean, and I can even normalize with respect to variance. That is, sigma square is equal to 1 over m sigma 1 equal to 1 m xi. This is my variance, and you have this x is given by x divided by the variance. This is how I get a normalized x input value, which will not change the learning activity. So my high variance will be like this, my curve of learning will be like this. I try to smoothen it as much as possible by regularizing. Okay, so this is what I discussed just now. Okay, so normalization, when I say with respect to high variance, you can clearly see this is how the distribution would look like when it is unnormalized in a three-dimensional surface. Okay, so my learning would happen like this. So you have the learning plane like this. So it will be haphazard. So it will meet the middle like this. Okay, so when I try to normalize, my data distribution will be quite normalized, a normal distribution like this. Okay, complete normal circle like structure. So this is spherical, whereas this is circular. So this is normalized. Okay, equal across every angle. So in this case, the learning rate will become much smoother. So it will be a circle here instead of a spherical. So your learning will be smooth and it will not be a zigzag. Okay, so that is how the normalization reduces the variance. Okay, there's something called a vanishing gradient and exploding gradient. So vanishing gradient is basically when there is a high bias. So vanishing gradient, it does not learn more when there is no more data. So your learning will go like this. At some point, it becomes straight. So that means there is no error at all. When there is no error back propagating, it doesn't learn at all. Okay, that is vanishing gradient. Exploding gradient is it keep on zigzag like this. It never stabilizes. So that is an exploding gradient. So how do we know that? Do we check for whether it is vanishing in the middle layers, whether it is exploding? So there's a method for checking for a gradient. Okay. So how to check for a gradient in the middle layers, right? So I do this. So I have an equation. So d of theta, okay, it's an approximate gradient you compute at layer ith layer. So that is given by the cost of the previous layer, theta 1, theta 2, these are the error function at theta I plus sigma. Epsilon, okay, that's the next layer of the current layer, minus j theta of theta 1, theta 2, theta I minus epsilon, like this. So I need to take the difference and 2 of epsilon. Okay, so this actually gives me the error loss between two different intermediate layers, that is at ith location. It will be a partial derivative of the cost function with respect to theta I. So I can even say, so at that point, whatever is computed, the approximate minus the actual theta. Okay, I take the least squared error between the actual loss expected and the loss happening at the middle layers. And this is my, I take the difference, theta approximate, okay, plus d theta square. Okay, so this is basically the similarity of the loss you have computed and the actual thing. So if it is smaller, 10 to the power of minus 10 and more, so the error is the expected gradient and the computed gradient is correct. If the difference is larger, 10 to the power of minus 1 or minus 2, so it is not good. Okay, so that is how you can check for a gradient computation, right? So, right, so let's move on to this. So type of learning, there are three types of learning. One is stochastic gradient learning. So what is stochastic gradient learning? So the point here is, why does the problem of vanishing and exploding gradient happens? Because of the data set. So I don't have to feed the entire data to eliminate this. What I do is I go with one element at a time. Okay, so stochastic gradient is basically the learning curve will be like this. At every iteration, it will converge like this. It will finally arrive at this. So whereas to avoid this, so I convert the entire data set into batches. Okay, so batch gradient learning. So out of 1,000 data, I create a batches of say 200, 200, 200, and like that. So or maybe 2 batches of the entire data set. And here, when I do it, so I get a little curvy problem. So I don't get much of error here. So much more effective method is mini batch gradient. Mini batch gradient, you make a batches, very smaller batches, and your gradient will be quite smoother. Okay, so this is how the learning happens, and you can avoid the exploding gradient problem. Okay, right. Okay, let's quickly move on to this with this small mathematical insight. I'll quickly get you through into the convolutional neural network, one of the very popular deep neural networks, which is mainly used in computer vision. So here you can see how CNN works. I assume this XY, this matrix is an image matrix, the data matrix, and what I do is I have two important operations in convolution neural network. One is convolution and max pooling. So I create a mask. This is my filter. Okay, so this filter is basically the weight function, weight vector, and this is my X. Okay, so what I do is I multiply this filter with this value. Initially, I start with some default weight values, and I convolve this procedure. And when I convolve, I get a result here. So, and convolution followed by max pooling, I try to take the summarize, extract the values of these four different elements, and I get this. Max pooling is basically taking the maximum of this, and this. Okay. So again, this is nothing but the same thing I'm trying to do with in a matrix representation, convolution and max pooling. So you can see how the convolution filters are basically the weight matrix, and I get this is how the convolution pooling is converted. So every time I do it, this is one layer, this is another layer. This is a typical neural network series of logistic regression. This is another neural network. So finally, this will be a complete convolution neural network model, right? Fine. Now, what happens in a CNN is it avoids everything whatever we have learned: feature extraction, dimensionality reduction, and many other pre-processing activities necessary. So it observes and learns. As we understand, deep learning is basically it observes the characteristic features by itself and tries to assign the probabilities at the first layer, second layer, and middle level layers and higher level layers. Okay. Finally, it arrives at whether it is a tiger or not. So that's the beauty of deep learning structures. Okay. So to historically say, Lennet is the very first CNN, which was devised in 1990, which has 5 convolution layers, and deeper the layers, more the learning happens. Okay, and you have this is how the Lennet, it was created by Jan LeCun, so that's why it is Lennet. So you have subsampling is nothing but max pooling, convolution, max pooling, convolution, max pooling, then dense networks. Okay, then Gaussian connections. Okay, so this is step-by-step activities of whatever I shown in the diagram. So I don't get into these things. I will quickly move on to the model summary. So this gives me at every convolution layer, I have an activation function is tanh, hyperbolic, average pooling, hyperbolic, all this. Finally, at the last layer, I have a softmax layer. Okay, so this is another AlexNet is another very important next thing that came at in 2012 by Alex Krzyzewski. So it has got so many 8 layers. Okay, so you can see this is VGGNet with 8 layers, same as AlexNet. And there's another version of VGGNet that is 16. Okay, then you have 19. Okay, so more the number of layers, more the number of activation functions, more the learning it will be. But making sure that there should not be any, bias or high variance or overfitting or underfitting happening. So we should take care by looking at all the regularization and other things in mind. Okay, then you have VGGNet explained in detail. I will not get into this. So inception model is GoogleNet. It is basically from the Google, and they have 2 different inception structures where it gives us an option in choosing whether it is a 3x3 convolution, 5x5, or 3x3. So this 3x3, 5x5 are the filter sizes. Filter size means the weight matrix. So how much of weight matrix you are supposed to take. Okay. So I don't have enough time to describe all these things. I'll quickly move on to this. So the layers of all these inception models are grouped together, and you see that they are stacked like this. So that's how. And today's GoogleNet inception model are very much popular, and they are being trained with lot of millions of natural images so that it can recognize much of the things. Then we have ResNet, wherein this is one more thing. As I was talking to you about the vanishing gradient, this problem can be eliminated by this skip network. So this value here, the activation function will be forwarded to the subsequent layers, as you can see here. So once it starts from here, so at some point, the gradient will vanish and you will never learn, right? So to avoid that, I keep forwarding the activation function so that I retain the loss. until the end of the entire layer so that it learns much more. It's like, assuming that it is still not learned, it tries to observe again and try to make it more accurate. So this is quite popular nowadays in most of the computer vision applications. There are other variants like transfer learning. So transfer learning is like, in most of the cases, you don't get millions of data set because deep learning requires a lot of data elements. In that case, as we see here, the GoogleNet, ResNet, and all of those pre-trained networks can be used. Okay, and at last few layers, you can feed your input and start training them. That means, instead of teaching a novice, you teach a learned fellow, it will be much more quicker than teaching a novice. Okay, so that is what transfer learning is. Okay, and you will get results here. One shot learning is you don't have to, again, it's a pre-trained network. So you just have to feed two pre-trained network, two inputs, and try to see the output. If both are matching, so both are similar, or if not, this is basically used in face recognition or object detection and other applications. Okay, so there are some more things about speech recognition. These are basically sequence model. These are quite typical. They're quite different from the convolutional neural network. They are specifically meant to analyze the continuous data or time series data like speech, music, or text, sentiment in the text, or DNA sequence analysis, the translation of the text, video activity. These are all the time series data. So to assess that, there are different types of model. Specifically, we call this as cell structure. This is recurrent neural network. Okay, so you can clearly see this is not same as CNN, but here the activation functions are moved forward every time the prediction happens, and these predictions will be updated in the time like this. So as the number of inputs are provided in the time series, the activation functions and the output predictions will also get modified. Okay, so here the number of layers will increase vertically in contrast with the CNN, where you see that the number of layers were increasing horizontally. So here it is a one-to-one. You have one neuron, one layer here, another layer here. So this is image capture, one image you give and you get many descriptions. Sentiment, you give a lot of texts here, the words, you get the mood, and you get English language, you get a Kannada, and or many Hindi or whatever. You give video sequence, and you get the description for that. Okay. Then I don't get into the, again, this is I just tell you how this RNN cell works. This again, you have a weight, the slope, the weight values for the given activation function, you convolve that, and then again, you take the input and convolve. This is my previous activation. I give weightage to that, I give weightage to input, and I add them here along with the bias. And I feed it to the hyperbolic tan function and I get the next activation. And the current output at this current time t will be this, the y cap at time t. Okay, and that is given by the softmax function here. And that again fed into the next cell in the time series. Okay. So this is bidirectional. Suppose if the time series analysis to be done in either direction, from backward, from forward, I use a forward and bidirectional thing. I don't get into the details right now. So this is long or short-term memory analysis because it is time series. So remembering is one of the very important activities. So that is why I go with this. So again, I cannot get into the details of this. Let's try to understand the concept. Some of the deep learning frameworks, and I think if I have 10 more minutes, I can show you one of the demo of how convolutional neural network can be used to classify one of our research problem. I myself and Anand have done together. So this is our research area, and so can we go ahead? Okay. So yeah, I'll show you the demo here. So I'll switch from this. Yeah. my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So this is a case study of histopathological image classification using convolutional neural network. Okay, so this is basically to just to brief you, because there are a lot of mathematics people, mathematicians will not be knowing about the domain knowledge. Here you just have to understand that this is an image of a tissue taken at a microscopic level with certain stains. You know, this is how the pathologists will study the microstructures of this tissue and try to come out with the predictions of whether the patient has a cancer or not, whether it is a benign or malignant. That's the term basically they use. So you can see this is by the medical terms, they say the first one is a benign tissue and this is malignant. They look at the nuclei structures and various other characteristics. So since as a computer scientist now, we need to understand those features, extract them, and then treat them as inputs with certain weightages. Okay, that's in a manual machine learning stuff. But when it comes to deep learning, I don't have to even know them. So I just have to feed these images. I just have to know prior that these are the benign. This is how the benign sample looks like, and I train the network, and the network will come to know that the features which resembles this particular type of thing will be benign, and the features which resemble the second one are malignant. So that's the beauty of deep learning. So we'll try with two different networks here. One is shallow network, other one is a CNN. So let me run this. You can see the code in action now. Right. So this is basically done using one of the popular deep learning framework called TensorFlow. So I need to import the TensorFlow as TF. This is the entire program is written in Python. I think most of you might be familiar with that. So this is a Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook, from where it's an interactive programming environment to run your Python code. So I'll just run this, and this Keras, I'm just importing most of the packages which are necessary to run my the neural network models. Okay, so I just run this. So I've imported these things. I explore the example data. So I take the data set, I have categorized. I can show you the categorization of how the data set has been done. So I have taken images of histopathological images taken in at 400x zooming level. Okay, so this is a standardized data set taken from Rakis data. So these are the data sets. These are not the. Right. So I have already categorized the benign images into a class called benign. So I have so many images in this. So as you understand, machine learning and deep learning networks, they require huge lot of input data. So I have accumulated few of them for the demo. So then again, for malignant, I have another handle of data set here. So I go back. This is how I have classified. So I can show you how it works in this. So I'm taking this and I'm splitting them into training and validation set. You know, because now I have to train my machine with out of so many data set, there are 1,376 files. Out of that, I need to take 70%. You can see in this code, 70% are taken for training purpose, and remaining 30% are taken for validating the training, whether the training has been done properly or not. So you can take the ratio of 80, 20, 75, 25 or whatever, right? 60, 40. So here I have fixed 70 and 30. So let me split this, and you can see how It is splitting the files into training and validation set. So you can clearly see them in the set here. I go to the data split. Okay, you see this. There's a training folder and validation folder, and I see there are benign and 70% of benign, 70% of malignant in the training data. Similarly, I go to validation. I have 70% of benign, 30% of benign, 30% of. So I've done with that. Now I created directories of benign and malignancy. So you can see here. So I go ahead with this. So I just try to list out the sample images from training folder and from benign and malignant. Okay. And just splitting this, listing out how many are there in the training benign group, 537 images, for malignant 674. Similarly, validation I have 245 in benign and validation malignant 298. Okay, it is 70-30 split. So now I will just to show a few of the images. I am just plotting those images here. So you can clearly see the above group or benign and some of them are malignant. Okay. So now I go with the shallow network. That's a deep. It's not a deep network. It's simple neural network with logistic regression model. So now I create a model like this. I take the TensorFlow, utils from the Keras framework, and it's a sequential model. So I have a dense network of 8.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, your screen is not
Hello,
visible,
sir.
sir.
Your screen is not visible.
Oh, sorry. 1 second.
After so many.
Okay. Thank you for
Thank you,
reminding.
sir. Thank you.
Is it fine now? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think these things were seen, right? Okay. The training and benign images are like this, and these are the sample images I'm just displaying. I start with shallow network, and this is my dense network with 8 layers, and I have the one more dense layer with 50 activation nodes, and I just run this. I'm just creating with a sigmoid function. So this is the model summary. Whatever the model I have created, I am summarizing that model.summary, right? And total trainable parameters are this many. So you can see 16,38,533 input parameters are going to be trained in this total dense network. Okay, so we can see how this. I need to even compile the model with the optimizer. In this case, I'm using a RMS prop optimizer. I think yesterday you have learned about RMS prop optimizer with learning rate of 0.01. And the last function is the binary cross entropy is one of the last function. That's also you have done yesterday. And the metrics we are interested in is the accuracy of training. So with all these parameters, I'll be compiling the model. And now I start generating the data with data generator. There's an image data generator. I rescale the images to normalize the thing. Then I flow from directory, from the training directory and validation. I create two data generator, training generator and validation generator. So I have created. So totally 1211 images belonging to 2 classes in the training data and 543 in the validation, including both benign and malignant. Okay. Now I start with training. So model.fit. So I have created model, I have compiled the model, and now I have to fit the model. So fitting a function, it is quite similar to fitting a function. Now this is the initial iteration, initial first step of fitting the function. So first step will not give you exact thing. There will be a loss, the error, and that error will be corrected after each epoch. So epoch is basically one round of forward and backward iteration in the entire network. So you can see, I will just run this. You can see how the epochs are running. So this is first iteration. So it is training. There is a loss of 15% at every layer. There is an accuracy of 56%, and there is a loss of 10%. So this is the accuracy, and this is a error. So I got an error of 9.8. So I need to correct it. I need to go back to the second epoch. So my gradient derivation is computed. My new weight values and biases are computed. My second epoch is iterating with new weights and new bias value. I get a new thing, and even I'm doing a validation. So I'm just showing you this continues till I arrive at where I have a high validation accuracy than the training accuracy. That means I am validating with the highest accuracy of whatever the training happened. Okay. So in this case, I'm just stopping it to just for demonstration. I'm stopping it for 5 epochs. You can continue till you get an expected accuracy. So likewise, if I want to see the results of this, so it will take some time. It's plotting, it's still running. Yes, now you got these plots. Plot the accuracy and loss. So this is the blue line is training accuracy and the red line is a validation. Sorry, the reverse. Red is training and blue is validation. And you can clearly see this is validation accuracy is high. It's not overfitting. So that means you are getting the correct training is happening properly. Similarly, the inverse of the loss, you can see the training loss is less and validation loss is much lower than that. So that means I'm validating my training very accurately. So coming to the convolution deep network, so I can describe the CNN model here. So there it was just a dense network. So here I have a 2D convolutional mod network, okay, with ReLU function. Then I have a max pooling. The filter size is 16. Then you have 32 here. Then you have ReLU function. Then max pooling. Then flatten the entire parameters you generated at this layer. Then feed it to the dense network. Okay. So this I'm just showing you with the typical thing, with 4 different layers. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all. Okay. Now this is a model summary, and you have the total parameters are 6,32,489. So I'll just run. I'll compile the model with again RMS block optimizer, binary cross entropy, and the accuracy as the parameter which now I'll fit the model. I'll see the accuracy. Since this model has been created for testing purpose, you may not be able to compare this with the shallow. I'm just showing how both of them are working. Okay, this is convolutional network. So again, first epoch, second epoch. Just bear with me for 2 minutes. This is second epoch, validation accuracy. You can see that, you can observe the validation accuracy is decreasing. That means the model is not perfect. So you need to tune it. So I'm just showing you for them also. So how do you want to tune your model is to, as we saw in the slide, tune your hyperparameters like regularizing, dropouts, eliminating bias or variance or whatever, right? So we have seen the mathematics behind all those things. Check for the gradient in between the layers. Okay. So now you can see the validation is increased in the third epoch and again decreased. It keeps varying, depends on the model. At the last thing you have 83%, it is quite higher than the other remaining. So likewise, I can plot this and you can see, yeah, the blue line is validation. It is fluctuating because the model is not such. It's not a perfect model, just for a demonstration. I have the loss. Yeah. That's congratulations. You have learned how to build a convolutional. But if I have enough time, I could have shown a case study for sequence models also, RNN and LSTM, but I don't have enough time. Anyway, I think with this I can conclude my lecture. So thank you very much. If you have any doubts, I can take them. Any questions? thank you. Thank you. I think so Matan thoroughly appreciate it was very vital considering such a feed forward. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matan. So, thank you very much.
Audience, you have any questions to? Okay. So I hope you had a wonderful session today. This is the end of fourth day, and we have really come to. We have one more day to go. Thank you, Dr. Shivamurthy, for your enlightening talks on going from a simple neural network to deep neural network. As you all know, deep neural network have become a de facto standard for all the applications. I really thank all the audience for your patient listening. So, few things to be done for tomorrow. One is we have a very good session on Dr. Ashish Ghosh, ISA Calcutta. He will be talking more about supervised learning as an SVM, and then we have one more talk by the general talk on happy progressive learning. So we have scheduled your test and other things. So that will be intimated to you all by in the WhatsApp group. So I think it will be by the end of the day. You should be able to get the links for tomorrow's test and things. So any doubts you have in this session, so still we have here. So you can get connected. So later on also you can get connected with us to the lab, and then we can have some doubts clarified. So thank you very much for today. We'll end for the day, and we will meet tomorrow morning at 9:30 for another wonderful talk. Thank you.